Hello, we are live once again Saturday morning with the Letter Winners podcast. Myself, Eric Froton at CF Froton, my co-host, the purveyor of the CFF site, Mike Bainbridge. And we had a pretty good week last week, Mike. You know, we went 4-5, the previous week before that. And last week, 5-2, hit 2 more on the sides, went 3-1 on the PrizePicks recommendations. So, looking to keep that positive momentum flowing here as we break into the late injury news. Jaquarii Roberson, questionable against Clemson. Now, he only played 2 snaps. He only got 2 targets last week for 12 yards, which led to A.T. Perry getting like 21 targets. I've seen 19. I saw up to 22. I was watching that game and soup to nuts. And it felt like he had 30, I'll be honest. Like, they just kept chucking it to him downfield, even though he only caught like 5 passes. But they went big. 2 of them for touchdowns, had 100 yards, etc. But against Clemson, man, you don't want to be a one-dimensional offense at the very least. Jordan Whittington playing against West Virginia. First time in a long time. Welcome back to their starting slot receiver. And frankly, Texas needs all the help they can get after that humiliating loss to Kansas. 31-point underdogs, and they won outright last week. And sticking with Texas, Bijan Robinson out for the season as discussed. Roschon Johnson, Rojo, starting for Texas running back. Also, Keelan Robinson, who was out last week due to virus protocols, COVID, has been cleared to play this week. So, Michael, thoughts on those 3 news bites?
Yeah, Jaquarii Roberson, I saw he did travel to Clemson. He was on the bus or plane or whatever they take down the road. But I don't expect Jaquarii to play. So I would sit him in any format of college fantasy that you're playing in. It's not a good matchup regardless, even, with how Sam Hartman is performing this year. Clemson, and as bad as they've been on offense, they're still an elite defense, especially against the pass. So I wouldn't even risk playing Jaquarii. But it is interesting, just kind of how the dynamic of the receiving core will change. I know A.T. Perry got fed last week. I think actually Keyshawn Williams is going to be out too for Wake Forest. So I think we'll get a top 3 of Perry, Taylor Morin in the slot, where he's better suited in the slot. He's not an outside receiver. And then Donald Stewart on the outside. So I think the targets should funnel between those 3. So probably decent options in PPR formats with the way Hartman's throwing it, but not a necessity against the Clemson defense. And then just hitting quickly on the Texas backfield, initially I was like, all right, Roschon Johnson, 3,600. We got to jam him in our lineups, but I don't necessarily see that way because, one, I think he's going to see higher ownership in DFS because everybody's going to be on it. I think he's going to split carries with Keelan Robinson. I think they have 2 differing running styles. I think Steve Sarkisian will find a way to use both. And then West Virginia has been better against the run. They, I think, allow under 4 yards a carry on the season, 42nd in rush success rate. So while, 3,600 starting running back, you kind of have to find a way to jam him in your lineups. It's not necessarily the greatest of matchups.
Yeah, I believe actually Roschon Johnson's 3,800, Keelan Robinson's 3,600. That's where you're getting the 36. Both obviously very lowly priced over there in DraftKings. Next set of business, Grayson McCall, the all-world signal caller for Coastal Carolina, listed as questionable. He practiced a little bit this week. Jamie Chadwell was pretty cautious when it came to saying, oh, he's going to play or he's not. He kind of left it cryptic, which is standard fare for pretty much any college coach that you've listened to. I'm sure this isn't anybody's first rodeo here, but you never really know if they're going to play or not. And that's a big issue because last week against Georgia State, the Panthers pulled out the upset, with backup quarterback in without McCall. The offense didn't flow just quite as efficiently, though they did score over 40 points. It was more on the defensive side. But that's obviously something you want to watch because when McCall is in, that offense is humming. And then back to Clemson, Justin Ross and Joseph Ngata out against Wake Forest. And, if anybody who's been looking at that pass offense, Clemson's pass offense ranks in the very bottom 20 in just about every metric, be it efficiency, explosiveness, success rate. I mean, up and down the list, it's as bad as it gets, unfortunately. And having arguably their top two wide receivers is an issue. And, obviously you want to take a look at Bo Collins, as Mike and I certainly did in our props game planning last night, as well as you'll want to kind of move on to UCLA. Brittain Brown likely out against USC, has not been practicing much this week. Anytime you don't see anybody suiting up for practice at all, even in limited fashion, you have to send up some signal flares. That's an issue. Expect a little bit more of Zach Charbonnet, of course. Michael, thoughts on those news bites?
Yeah, I'll just hit on real quick the UCLA backfield. It hasn't been as prolific as it was at the start of the year. That's for sure. But if you have one of those guys sitting, you're guaranteed almost 20 carries for Zach Charbonnet this week. So I've got him a couple FanDuel lineups this week. So I really like him as a start. I didn't see it on the show sheet if you want to cover Bo Collins right now.
We can cover Bo Collins. Bo Collins is 38.5.
There you go.
He opened up on DraftKings. He's all the way up to 57.5 now, which is probably really where he should be. I even doubled up, put him in my column at 45.5, and it shot up even after that. So we've seen a noticeable uptick. When it comes to Collins, 3 of the past 4 games, he's had at least 9 targets. So he's getting the work, and that was even when they did have Ross in, though, it was revealed by Dabo Swinney that he's been battling the foot injury pretty much all season. Foot injuries, especially Jones fractures, can be extremely problematic. Both of us, Michael and myself, I think we can say that we love Bo Collins in terms of DFS as well as likely for the DraftKings, even though it's ticked up to a less attractive number. He's going to be the primary target there. He's going to get 8 to 10 looks, you'd have to think, whether they're downfield or not, and against the Wake Forest defense that is susceptible to the pass when it comes to their explosiveness. That's something that at least, if there's ever been a defense, you got to think that Clemson can overcome, that DJ Uiagalelei can possibly do something against. You'd think it would be Wake Forest.
Well, we said that with Connecticut last week.
It's been so bad. It's been awful. It's just been a complete dumpster fire.
I would add, though, that Dakari Collins is also in the mix for DFS purposes because he came in for Ross last week, and he had double-digit targets, I believe. So both of them super cheap in DFS. So that's a direction you could look towards.
Absolutely. The Collins boys, be on the lookout there. Something to think about. Last set of news bites. Tanner McKee, Stanford, listed as probable versus Cali. He's been practicing this week, which is, my gosh, if anybody has had the displeasure of having to watch that Stanford offense for the past 2 weeks, it has been nothing short of pathetic. Okay? Ari Patu started last week. He couldn't do anything. Anything. Kid's true freshman. He's a 4-star, but clearly more of a dual threat and wasn't ready for reading the defenses and be able to really stretch the field, throwing the ball, of course. And the week prior, Jack West started. He was completely worthless. Gave it over to Isaiah Sanders, who was all right. He then got hurt, and then they had to throw Patu in. Both of those games were complete clear the deck, get him out of here. Just worthless performances. Right now, Stanford is getting 1.5 points against Cal, where they're coming off of their, situation with COVID, where half the locker room had it. But they should be good to go since they were all vaccinated and should be fully stocked for the game. Next, Zach Evans, a weekly contributor here to the late breaking news column. He is once again not expected to play in a wonderful matchup against Kansas that has gotten lit up by pretty much everybody. Which is unfortunate. You should. Amari DeMercado was pretty good last week. I think he had 92 yards on a per carry basis. Didn't get a ton of carries though, and obviously you will be on the lookout for Kendre Miller, which he should suit up. I would think he would get the bulk of that work in a pretty good matchup. Lastly, Danny Gray, questionable against Cincinnati. Messed up his ankle last week. Came out pretty early in that game. I know as of like the midweek, he wasn't practicing. Sonny Dykes did try to couch it by saying that he's a fast healer. Sounds like coach speak to me personally. So that's something you definitely want to be aware of in a big matchup against Cincinnati. You'll be dealing with Sauce Gardner. Instead, that'll probably shift over to Rashee Rice, and you can see a little bit extra work for Reggie Roberson, who's priced at $4,900 in DraftKings right now on the main slate. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll cover the SMU receivers a little bit later. Just real quick on the TCU backfield. Yeah, I agree. It does sound like Keandre Miller is going to play. It's a great matchup, obviously, against the 128th ranked rush defense. But it's going to be a distribution of carries between Miller, DeMercado. They're going to split most likely unless we get news that Miller's out. And then, Chandler Morris, he had 17 carries before last week's, disaster against Oklahoma State. So you got to figure he's going to factor into the equation. So, they're good plays, but I think you're going to see the carries kind of spread amongst those three guys.
Yeah, that's a logical conclusion, I think, absolutely. And we will move on to our sides. I am going to go with, and we were just talking about it, TCU Kansas. Kansas is getting 3 touchdowns against TCU. Okay, now I know this is Kansas. Against the great teams, they've blown them out. However, they managed to hang with the lower rung teams. Obviously we saw that again last week against Texas. They played a lot better since getting Mr. Bean out of there and putting Jaylen Daniels at the helm, where he had 4 touchdowns last week. Did a nice job. Devin Neal looks good. I think obviously TCU is going to have a problem scoring, but keep in mind, this TCU defense is one of the worst in the country, and by any objective measure. And I'm not worried about them stopping Kansas. I expect TCU to outscore them, of course. But when you're getting 3 touchdowns against that horrible defense, Kansas, good coaching staff, Lance Leipold, I forget. But either way, Lance Romance is at the helm now, and he's proven himself at every level to be a winner. And he's done a good job in terms of getting this team a little bit better each week. I just think they stay within 3 touchdowns. That's just simply too much to give to this pathetic TCU team. Of course, I'll probably blow them out now. But, Michael, your sides.
I wouldn't be surprised if that one turns into, kind of a replay of Kansas, Texas from last week. TCU lost season, kind of coaching change, obviously. Can't play defense, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that one turn into a shootout. I like the over team total for Western Kentucky this year. They've been a fantasy gold mine, of course, this year. I feel terribly about some of my preseason predictions, kind of limiting what I thought they could do, and they've blown that out of the water. They're averaging 45 points per game in conference. Bailey Zappi is killing it, of course, 417 passing yards per game, 6-to-1 interception or touchdown to interception ratio. They faced Rice last week, who's a team that wants to dominate the time of possession, and Western Kentucky blew past their team total last week as well. They're facing Florida Atlantic, kind of similar, want to grind it out. But you know what? Most teams have wanted to do that this year against Western Kentucky, and it's been to no avail. So, Florida Atlantic gave up 30 last week to Old Dominion. I have a lot of confidence that Western Kentucky can get to at least 40 this week.
Amen. I can't find any fault with that. And it should be quite a shootout. FAU can put points on the board too. So both teams will have to keep pace with each other. And with Johnny Ford back there, he's been known to hit a home run or two. So, yeah, plenty of points coming in that extravaganza. On to our DFS plays for the main slate, my core 2. Phil Jurkovec. $4,500, min-priced quarterback. He's going to be owned everywhere. He's a free super flex at $4,500, and you can go and roster C.J. Stroud or wherever you want to and get really creative, or you can really load up the running backs there. That is a premium deal. Obviously, a drastic oversight by DraftKings. We've seen quite a few mistakes on their part on the prop side over the past few weeks with Max Johnson, with Henry Colomby the week before, in terms of guys who were splitting time. This is another one. I don't know how you have Dennis Grosel at $5,300 and Phil Jurkovec $4,500 after he put up over 40 fantasy points the week before against Georgia Tech. But here we are. That's what it is. Playing Florida State. Give me Phil Jurkovec 4,500. He's going to be widely owned is the only issue, as everybody is going to figure that out pretty quickly. And I'm also backing Garrett Wilson. He's the 16th priced wide receiver on this slate. He had 3 touchdowns last week. I think he's still kind of getting dinged for the fact that he didn't play the week before, due to concussion issues. But they're playing against Michigan State, allowing 329 yards through the air, which is the worst in the entire country. All right. And that's not just the worst. They're 20 yards worse than the number 2 team. So we've seen teams just absolutely go at the Spartans through the air. Obviously, I expect that to happen with Ohio State. You and I, Mike, are pretty well leveraged in C.J. Stroud. The 311.5 is where he started on DraftKings for his prop. He's now up to 325.5, I believe, on that. That's gone up, and it's even more on other outlets. So, I'm obviously quite bullish on the Ohio State passing attack. Michael, your core 2 plays.
There is nothing more tilting than having a heater of a lineup and seeing 2 Ohio State receivers go off, and you have the third receiver. Of course, I was on Chris Olave last week. I know he got there, right? He scored a touchdown. He had 7 or 8 receptions, but nothing more tilting than that. Fire up CJ Stroud, of course, this week. My core play this week is definitely Leddie Brown. It hasn't been the season that we thought he would have had, but this is a primo matchup against Texas. I think they've allowed 200 yards in the 4 of the last 5 games. Brown is still getting touches, right? He's going to see the ball at least 20 times, whether it's via the run or the pass. And at 6,100, it's just too cheap for somebody that is getting guaranteed volume, 20 touches a game, right? I think that game's going to be a little bit slower. Trying to keep Casey Thompson and Xavier Worthy off the field. No better way to do that than with Leddie Brown. So he's easily in my core lineup this week. Secondly, I'm not going to dive into it too much, but Kenny Pickett. We have him projected at 400 passing yards this week. You just got to fire him up in your lineup. I'm trying to make it work with Kenny Pickett and CJ Stroud in the same lineup because I think both could go for 50 this week. I don't even think you have to necessarily pair them with a receiver either. You just want these quarterbacks who are going to sling it around in your lineup. So, I think he should get maybe a couple of receivers back healthy this week. Virginia can't defend the run or the pass. So fire up Kenny Pickett.
Sounds good, brother. On to the bargain bin to kind of dovetail with the Kenny Pickett play. Jared Wayne, $4,300, straight go. And we don't know about Taysir Mack. That's something that was a late breaking news. He may or may not play. We really don't know. But either way, Jared Wayne has scored touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 games. He was manning the primary right outside wide receiver role, like the Z spot, in that Mark Whipple-led offense. And at $4,300, that's a pretty damn good deal, considering that there aren't a lot of great shots in the wide receiver slate down the board. There's a couple here, a couple there, but nothing I really love. $4,300, I think, is a great deal in that high-powered offense. And plus, going against Virginia's defense, who doesn't light up Virginia? It's a guaranteed 40 points, no matter what. I don't care. It's actually even better if Brendan Armstrong does play, because then maybe they'll score a little bit, and it actually means, Pitt has to keep the pedal to the metal through the very end. That's fine with me for this particular situation. And as I aforementioned, Roschon Johnson, Texas, $3,800. You could also look at, as we mentioned, Keelan Robinson's at $3,600. If you have a particular preference, you can kind of go that way. Robinson will be more widely owned, as Mike mentioned. So maybe you want to kick around Keelan Robinson, $3,600. Mike, your bargain bin.
Dylan Goffney for SMU. As we kind of alluded to earlier, don't expect Danny Gray to play this week. Could get breaking news, but, he was on crutches in a boot last week. I don't care what Sonny Dykes says about fast healers. I don't think he plays. if he doesn't, Dylan Goffney, the true freshman, is going to start in his place most likely. And I mean, he had 12 targets last week against UCF in Danny Gray's place, 10 receptions, 88 yards. I mean, you can't get much better than that as a 3K crapper. As we have seen in recent weeks, I know Cincinnati has that stout secondary, but they gave up
not so much against USF. Yeah,
no, they gave up chunk yardage to Timmy McClain. They've been vulnerable the last few weeks, and it's a weird dynamic. I was trying to think it through with the SMU receivers this week because the two outside corners, Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant, I believe, like they're obviously two of the best in the nation. So it's going to be Goffney and Reggie Roberson on the outside. Maybe it's a weak, a kind of a pivot play to play Rashee Rice in the slot. I mean, that's would be the perceived weakness of the secondary for Cincinnati would be the slot. So he's a possible pivot play, kind of going against the grain, low ownership. But if you're getting 10 targets from a min salaried receiver like Goffney, I think you can easily fit him in your lineup. And then quick second play, Donovan Edwards for Michigan. Blake Corum's out this week again. I think the line has risen towards Michigan even further. I think they're a 16.5-point favorite, if I'm not mistaken. So if you think that Michigan's going to blow out Maryland, which I do think they will, they're not going to give 30 carries to Hassan Haskins again. So, Donovan Edwards, talented 5-star freshman, he can get it done, and Maryland's very susceptible against the run. So, if all we need is 50 yards and a touchdown from him, and I think we get there with Edwards.
Yeah, Maryland is just plain susceptible, on defense. I don't even know if you have to qualify it. They are a trash defense, especially by Big Ten standards. So, a couple of great plays there. And another thing helping Dylan Goffney with Jordan Curley, who had been hitting some home runs earlier on, he's injured too. So even the secondary guy they put on the outside, he isn't even around. So, full go for Goffney. Core 2 plays for the evening. Hendon Hooker at $6,700. This slate is a thin slate, guys. Man, you don't have a lot of great options, but I mean, Hooker is like around 10, 11 in terms of the salary chart for quarterbacks against South Alabama. $6,700 in that, you have to. I mean, you simply have to. That's an easy call for me. And then, I also like Cedric Tillman to pair him with at $6,200. But, with Ole Miss going up against Vandy, $6,100. Dontario Drummond looked healthy last week. Plenty of targets. Should be able to kind of have their way with Vanderbilt. I think like everybody has so far. So why wouldn't Ole Miss have the same? I like Dontario Drummond at $6,100 to be a good mid-priced, shot at the wide receiver core where you can take those two players and then kind of beef up elsewhere. Michael, your two.
Yeah, Ole Miss. I just reading up on that offense this week, and it sounds like the full game plan is to steamroll Vanderbilt in the first half and then get your starters out to prepare for Thanksgiving. It's a short week, Egg Bowl coming up. They're going to steamroll them in the first half. So, I mean, I haven't looked at it, but you might want to take the over team total on Ole Miss in the first half. They're gonna go full go in that. My two core plays, Tank Bigsby, $5,900. It's just too cheap for him. We have a 21-point projection on him facing a South Carolina defense that just gets gashed on the ground. I believe he's healthy. He may not be healthy this entire year, or at least 100%. But he didn't get the carries last week just because of 2 fumbles. I don't think it was anything injury related. But South Carolina. I think Auburn is going to lean on the run a little bit more. I know this is contradicting one of your plays is contradicting one of your bargain bin plays, but I do think Auburn's going to lean on the run against South Carolina this week. So I like Tank Bigsby at that price. And then Travis Dye, I mean, he's getting touches in droves. He's got like 34 targets in the last 5 games alone. So averaging, 5 targets a game. So he should get there on the run, pass. He scores fantasy points. You want him in your lineup.
Yeah, and they're going to have to, obviously, it's going to be probably a competitive game against Utah. They're actually 3-point dogs and on the road with the Utes. So that's definitely a game. And what a great night game to have for Capper. It's about time we got a little action in the Pac-12 we can sink our teeth into. Bargain bin for the evening, as Michael mentioned, TJ Finley, Auburn, $5,600. Again, this is a tight quarterback slate in the evening. There's really not a lot of sexy in this slate. So I'm going with TJ Finley. Again, I think that Auburn handles South Carolina pretty easily. Finley can run a little bit too. I don't think they'll be afraid of doing a little bit of RPO there with him. I think you get some carries, and then obviously, they'll be able to move the ball pretty efficiently. And my other one, making it a full boat in Auburn, Jarquez Hunter, only $3,300. I think they get a nice little lead here, and you'll see plenty of Hunter, who's proven to be a very explosive option for the Tigers there. So, between Bigsby, not wanting to ride him too hard with Alabama looming next week, they're going to want to get that victory. They're going to want to get up nice and quick. And then I see at least double-digit carries for Jarquez Hunter at $3,300. The price is right. You can't really argue with that in a shortened slate. Michael.
Yeah, I looked like an idiot last week, and I texted you saying I'm sorry for crapping on your Jaylen Daniels. I will keep my mouth shut this week on TJ Finley because Jaylen Daniels ended up being in the winning GPP lineup last week. So
somebody listen to me. They listen to me. Smart.
Lips closed this week. I like Michael Wilson for Stanford, 3,900. Like we alluded to earlier, Tanner McKee back in the fold. I don't think Elijah Higgins is playing this week. So it's going to be Michael Wilson or Ben Jurkovec in the passing game for Stanford. Again, you get a boost with McKee back at quarterback, and he looks healthy. He played probably 90% of the offensive snaps last week. So at 3,900, I really like that play a lot. And then on the Tennessee side, Jaylen Wright, the backup to Jabari Small. 28-point favorite over South Alabama, probably going to get some of the young guys in the mix. Josh Heupel already likes to rotate his running backs. Tyon Evans is out, so it's going to be probably just Jabari Small and Jaylen Wright in that backfield. South Alabama is actually ranked 23rd in the country in rush defense, but they have played nobody this year. Best offense they played was Louisiana, and they rushed for 250 yards against South Alabama. So I think Tennessee will have no issues via the run or the pass against South Alabama.
Completely agree. Absolutely. Jake Bentley or no Jake Bentley, doesn't really matter. On to our favorite prize picks. Use promo code BETSPERTS if you're getting in there and you want a piece of this action. Let me tell you, we got some pretty good deals here this week. I think we're going to have some winners. You might want to go and jump in if you were in a state that allows you to play. Put in the promo code BETSPERTS and you'll get matched up to $200 on your first installment that you put in there. Hopefully be your last. You'll be able to win plenty of money. That being said, my number one play, and I think, Mike's, mine, give a shout out to Chris K, the DFS expert himself, who kind of made sure to give us a tip on this. Sam Howell, UNC, under 297.5 passing yards. Howell, the biggest issue you're going to have is, does he play? He was extremely banged up last week. Said that he might only get one single series just to kind of get out there in this game. Anytime you hear that you're going to have restricted snaps for a quarterback who's already hurt, don't need to really push it for UNC this week, under 297.5 passing yards, he's not going to get anywhere near that. I think that's been sort of a linchpin of all our prize picks, myself and Michael, for this slate. Also, love Sean Clifford, over 215.5 passing yards. Playing Rutgers, the only time Clifford isn't going over, the 215 mark, which is really low considering they have a terrible rushing offense, is against Michigan last week, which he got to 207, 208, which is right there. It's close, but it's Michigan, okay, Michigan. And then you saw him light up Ohio State, saw him light up Maryland. He's not going to have a problem. The offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich, he wants to throw the ball. That's what they're there to do over there at Penn State. 215.5 is going to be a breeze against Rutgers. Michael, your prize picks.
Yeah, we discussed these prize picks last night, and late night, and I was stunned that you had some hesitancy to Noah Cain under, 42 and a half rushing yards. This is our favorite underplay.
It's our favorite.
Every single week. We like the 42 and a half. Even if Noah Cain was the starter, he's not going to be the starter. It's going to be Kayvon Lee. Now, I watched the majority of the Michigan game last week. I did not see if Noah Cain got banged up or not. He played 3 snaps. So I think that's the only thing we have to worry about this week is making sure that Noah Cain plays. They've been trending upwards with Kayvon Lee. He's going to be the guy this week. As long as we get a snap, Noah Cain is going under that total. And then one of my favorite plays, again, of the weekend is Taj Washington over 5.5 receptions. I actually got him at 4.5 earlier in the week. He had, last time out against Arizona State, 15 targets. 15 targets. It's with Drake London out of the picture, unfortunately.
He had 10 the game before. 10 targets. Yeah. He's getting peppered.
Yep. And we got a quarterback upgrade, right? Jackson Dart starting for USC. So I think that passing offense is just going to funnel through Taj Washington, through Gary Bryant. Might get a sprinkling of Michael Jackson, the talented true freshman. There you go. I should have known that was coming. Actually a roommate of Jackson Dart, I believe I read. So they have a little roommate connection there. So I think it's going to be those 3 in the passing game. But, he's going to hit that with ease.
And like you said, Noah Cain. I mean, if there's my favorite under all season long has been the Noah Cain rushing. It's been my thing. Mike, you're right. And you talked me into it, and I put him in. I was like, you're right. What am I talking about? How dare I actually take or suggest that a Noah Cain under might not be a correct play? So that's my fault. Thank you for talking sense into me on the Noah Cain under. I absolutely co-opted. Love the Taj Washington. I'm on all those plays. I think they're all great. That's going to wrap it up for this week's Letter Winners podcast. Myself, Eric Froton at CF Froton, NBC Sports Edge. I will be on live on Twitter Spaces in a half hour starting at 11:30 with Von Dalzell and Corey Parsons. Pulling double duty. We'll be going through more sides. Yeah, I know. Hey, I've been begging NBC Sports Edge to let me do, one of these last second deals. So they're finally kind of giving us a run, and I appreciate it. But we'll be doing more sides. I'll be getting deeper into the DraftKings and FanDuel props. FanDuel releases their stuff late. So I have quite a few of those that I've gone through that I'm going to be talking about and going through just the big games of the week that we don't have time to go through here. So myself, Eric Froton, my partner of the CFF site at MBainbridge CFF. Thank you very much for another Letter Winners podcast.